In the Halo universe, Spartans are very important. Being on the front of the box will do that. But those are the Spartan 2s. While their legacy is important, they would not exist without the trial and error of those that came before them. The Orion project, later on rechristened as Spartan 1, laid the groundwork necessary for every single Spartan that ever existed. But despite its importance, there's very little we actually know about the Orion project, with it being even more secretive in places than that of the later Spartan programs. That being said, it is significantly different, with the only thing it resembling being the Spartan 4 program of all things. The main reason why I say that is because the Orion candidates were all adults, usually career military or special forces, with a genetic augmentation profile that was a lot looser than the later Spartan programs, something that would create some problems for it later on down the line. The first attempt at the Orion project was conducted in the 23rd century, when the Office of Naval Intelligence decided to dip its toes into the super soldier programs for the umpteenth time, and it was not a success, putting it mildly. Of the 5 candidates chosen, all of them reacted poorly to the augmentations, and because of this, all 5 men would be sent back to their original stations, but not for very long, as over the next year, all 5 men would disappear under increasingly disturbing circumstances. How this happened is a total mystery, and there is definitely no obvious reason why this could have occurred. The second attempt was the first real success the UNSC had with creating super soldiers, except this time around it was not spearheaded by ONI, but by the Colonial Military Authority, more commonly known as the CMA. The CMA was a military organization designed to operate in the outer colonies while humans expanded into that territory, and this would become harder and harder as insurrectionist rebels continued to pop up, with many of them being within the CMA itself. Seeing the writing on the wall, the original passing curiosity the CMA had with Orion would very quickly change, with the Orion project being formally reactivated with the help of ONI. And in 2491, 65 different candidates would be selected and trained. And this was good timing considering the fact that around this point, the UNSC Marine Corps Colonel, Robert Watts, would defect to the insurrection, becoming the leader of the Secessionist Union and later on the United Rebel Front. Watts and his forces would begin to harass various UNSC installations throughout the colonies, with even the entire planet of Eridanus II falling into insurrectionist hands. Watts would be a thorn in the side of the UNSC for many years, with him eventually being killed by Blue Team in his first incarnation in 2525. But for now, he is a massive problem, one the Orion candidates were perfectly happy to solve. In 2496, the first Orion operation would occur with Operation Charlemagne, which saw all 65 Orion candidates being deployed in an attempt to reclaim Eridanus II from the insurrectionists. Something that went so well that not only did the planet successfully get reclaimed, the actions of the Orion candidates completely went unnoticed by the insurrection at large, with only 1 Orion project casualty being recorded. This would begin the UNSC and CMA's campaign of terror against the insurrection, and the peak of this would be Operation Kaleidoscope, during which many insurrectionist leaders and cells would be destroyed. Famously, Sergeant Johnson, a quite prominent member of this program, and well-known enjoyer of what the ladies like, would kill the then leader of the Secessionist Union, Gerald Ander, throwing the organization into disarray and making it collapse. Kaleidoscope was a resounding success. It would see the Orion project at its proverbial peak, with the number of Orion operators rising to over 300 by 2504. However, some of the actions of the Orion project would inevitably end up pushing certain members of the public into siding with the insurrectionists, as some of their actions were tending to be a bit extreme. The worst part about all of this, though, was the beginnings of the obvious warning signs and issues with the augmentations. Everything from PTSD to the body eventually outright rejecting the augmentations, requiring them to be surgically removed, were common. Some members, like Sergeant Johnson, even reported their brains going into rage-like states and having severe panic attacks. And it gets worse from there, as many of the recruits for the Orion project came from the CMA, which already had an insurrectionist sympathizer problem, and many of the Orion candidates that got augmented would eventually just say, "Nah, I'm not doing this anymore," so then they'd get de-augmented and then thrown into jail. All of this would be the last straw for ONI, as it would shutter the program in 2506 due to all of these problems, along with the fact that it began to get exorbitantly expensive for a little return on investment. The various surviving members would be placed back into the UNSC or CMA, and the project files would remain classified for years, with a fictional disease called Boren syndrome being created to cover for any remaining side effects any members might have. But there is one thing that would apply to all of the members that would survive the program. The augmentations would weirdly enough make the individual age at a significantly slower rate. This is why Sergeant Johnson, at 78 years old as of 2552, could apply for the seniors discount and look like a man in his 30s. It's also why the children of any Orion project candidates were significantly stronger and faster than other children of their age, which implies that these enhancements, along with other Spartan classes enhancements, could potentially be passed on, which is not something we've really seen before. Their training was incredibly grueling, and up until that point, it was the most dangerous and difficult Special Forces training program in history. Their equipment, by the same standard, was actually quite pedestrian. Standard ODST or Army fatigues, along with armor, and standard UNSC weapons. Maybe some more obscure stuff like the M99 stanchion, but for the most part, their equipment was pretty standard. Except for the Orion Exoframe Load Carrier Power Armor Suit. This is not Mjolnir. I know it looks like Mjolnir. It's not, because it's this suit that was developed for the Orion project under the name of Project Milano. This suit would actually be used by Dr. Halsey to further refine her advancements for the Mjolnir armor, which was later on used by the Spartan 2s and every other ones after, which could technically make these armors like cousins, brothers, something close. I don't know. The suit was used during Operation Kaleidoscope, and while it was quite effective, it was not very common. Despite the short-lived nature of the Orion project, it had a major impact on the UNSC at large. The methods of training were used to revitalize the ODST and what we know them as now, and even some minor versions of the injections that were used by Orion were adapted into stimulants for ODSTs and ONI operators as well, allowing them to operate in the field more effectively over a longer period of time. In a way, the Orion project walked so that way everything else after that could run, and the fact that they were as effective as they were, with this little information about them, should say a lot about how truly good they were. Now, I'm not even going to lie, there is not a lot of information about the Orion project, like, at all. Most of it, in all honesty, is passing references and little tidbits of lore that we get from extraneous pieces of dialogue that are entirely unrelated to this topic. There are a few books, though, that shed some decent amounts of light on it. No more than this video, to be fair, since I went and read and found literally anything about this, which, like I said, isn't a lot, but there's enough there to make it pretty digestible. The Spartan Field Manual, I got it a few years back, and it's a pretty decent book overall. It gives pretty detailed information about the augmentations and the program as a whole. Halo Mythos does a pretty decent job talking about it. The more recent Halo Encyclopedia talks about it a little bit, but not very much. Halo Contact Harvest shows some of Johnson's experiences firsthand with the Orion project, along with Halo Silent Storm, which gives some of Johnson's personal commentary about his feelings about the entire ordeal. There's also this one article on Halo Waypoint that has not necessarily a lot of information, but I had to use the Wayback Machine to find it since it's on the old version of the Halo Waypoint website, so all that old stuff is gone. But if you want to learn more about the Orion project, I recommend looking at all of those. Thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate you watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a member, and thank you very much to the YouTube channel members. It really does mean a lot to me that you're willing to support me. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a great night.